But it gets better. What happens is frickin' James White, who's an elder in the Apologia, whatever his Durban church is in Mesa, Arizona there. He writes a blog post called On the Sin of Empathy in defense of his little rugby rat. And he says, hey, folks. Oh, no. Sorry. So he originally did a tweet before this On the Sin of Empathy article. He just did a tweet. This was his tweet. Quote, hey, folks. Jesus endured all the trauma needed to accomplish redemption and reconciliation. Dragging your emotional trauma into the fellowship and making everyone else feel guilty for it is the perfect poison for the body. Get over yourself is all about him, not you. If we know anything about James White and Durban, they got a lot of nerve talking about negative things about emotional trauma. Then he did another tweet because people got mad at that, because acknowledging emotional trauma is not making it about yourself. It's trying to heal yourself to the point where you can function as a follower of Christ in your best possible capacity. Anyway, so his next tweet after that at some point, because people got hot and mad, which I don't blame them, quote, when you start with man as image-bearing creature of God, you can understand why sympathy is good but empathy is sinful. Do not surrender our mind to the sinful emotional responses of others. Basically, he says, like, if you have the right actual biblical view of, like, the human race, you'll get my point. You'll get why empathy is sinful. Then you'll see things my way. So then he writes this article on the sin of empathy. He starts with those two tweets to explain why he's bothering doing this. And he says, what is the problem with empathy today? We are in fact told to weep with those who weep, but that assumes those who weep have a reason for weeping that is in line with God's revelation. No, it doesn't. Tighty whitey, it doesn't. Where is that assumption? Where do you, pray tell, get that assumption? I'm going to go back to the little kid who touched the stove when she was told not to and starts crying. She doesn't have any reason to cry. She disobeyed. She deserves it. I'm not going to weep with her. I'm not going to help her. Well, she's a child. It's different. No, it's not different. When you start with man as an image-bearing creature of God, is that child not an image-bearing creature of God? Then don't empathize. Weep with those who weep. That assumes those who weep have a reason for weeping that is in line with God. I'm going to pull up that verse. Hold up. Weep with those who weep. Do not be slothful in zeal. Be fervent in speech. Serve. Here, actually, this gets better. The whole context. Let love be genuine. It starts with that. Let love be genuine. Let love, in other words, not have strings attached so that it was only given to people who align with your ideology. Abhor what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Let me tell you something. Brotherly affection, two brothers who are close are going to be partners in crime. I'm not saying that's good, but yeah, you're going to have the brother who rats on the other. But there are also brothers and sisters who are going to either take one for the team or just not say who broke the lamp kind of thing. That's brotherly affection. That is an element where you're going to, you could even put yourself in harm's way for the betterment of another person. You will consider their emotional plight. Dang, if I tell mom that my brother Johnny broke the lamp, he's going to get in trouble. I'm not saying a darn thing. Again, I'm not saying it's right, but we're talking, love one another with brotherly affection. You know, I know that's not really what it means, okay? Brotherly affection, like there's a friend that sticks closer to it, but like, brotherly affection is very clearly defined in Scripture. But you know, there's that little twinkle in God's eye as well, I believe, where there's an emotional aspect to it. Gosh. It doesn't say love one another, period. It doesn't say love one another with brotherly loyalty either. It doesn't say love one another with brotherly intellectualism. It says affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Be the take one of the team. Do not be slothful in zeal. Be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. This is all to the reader. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Seek to show hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. These are bad guys now, because he just said contribute to the saints. And then, so that's the saints. And they said, bless those who persecute you. You assume they're not the saints. So he has both sides. This is how you act toward good. This is how you act toward bad. Then it says, rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable to all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. For by doing so, you heap coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but be overcome evil with good. Honestly, from the bless those who persecute you verse all the way to the end of the darn chapter, it kind of sounds like opposite of tighty-whitey. He says, weep with those who weep, but that assumes those who weep have a reason for weeping that is in line with God's revelation. Actually, it doesn't. Actually, it says the damn opposite thing. It says, bless those who persecute, because I'm reading something in paragraphs, like mine separates by paragraphs here. So the paragraph that starts says, bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. And then the whole rest of the chapter in context is talking about dealing with people who don't align with God. And that also means you weep with them when they weep and rejoice with them when they rejoice. So tighty-whitey can't read a damn paragraph. Let's move on. He says, quote, we are not to weep with the drug dealer who accidentally drops his stash down the storm drain in New York City. We are not to weep with the bank robber who botches the job and ends up in the slammer. Why not? Sir, Jimmy, why not? I don't have to be sorry that the dealer didn't actually accomplish his plans. But that is also money. And if he ends up in jail, like, we going into liberal territory now, because 99% of drug dealers have mental problems who need vocational, medical rehabilitation, who are trying to feed their families and themselves in the only way they know how, / in a way that they've gotten roped into from a very young age. I weep for that. I do. And shame on you if you don't, Jimmy. Why are you not weeping over the fact that there are drug dealers who are living a life where dropping a stash down the storm drain in New York City exists? We live in that world. It is a sorrowful thing. When you start with man as image-bearing creatures of God, ... you should be able to weep with the bank robber who botches the job at the end and ends up in jail. What, like, do you not hear yourself, Jimmy? Do you not hear yourself? When you start with man as an image bearer of God, because, no, I see these people who drop their stashes down storm drains in New York City, and I see the people who botch up their robbery job and end up in the slammer as people who are made in the image of God, who are broken, who let their emotions run away with them, and who need redemption. You don't see that. What would you do? Let's see. Let's play a game. What would you do opposite? If you're not going to weep with that drug dealer or that bank robber, what are you going to do? Laugh? What are you going to do? I thank God I'm not like the other men. Are you going to do that one? What's the alternative? Is it indifference? Is it the priest walking by the Samaritan? What is it, Jimmy? Quote, but the new cultural orthodoxy is, you shall empathize. You shall enter into the emotions of others, and you shall not make judgments about said emotions. By doing so, you shall validate all human experiences as supreme. End quote. That's not empathy, honey. That's just plain sin. You are trying so hard to marry the term empathy. Someone you didn't like used the term empathy, and therefore the term empathy is bad. You know, lots of bad people use money too. You're just not going to use money. Lots of people use water. You're not going to drink water now. Okay, so Tidy Whitey starts going exactly where we're talking about here with the homosexual stuff. He says, 60 years ago, it was almost unthinkable that the Christian people would, by a majority, think homosexuality as a gift from God. But that is the case today. Why? Pause. Why? My darling Recon audience, why would people think that is a case today, that homosexuality could be a gift from God? And that is true. People in churches, for goodness sake. There was a whole controversy in the PCA a couple years ago about it. Why? I'll tell you why before we finish his damn sentence. It's sin. It is sin that calls good evil and evil good and black white and white black. That's what sin does. It corrupts the good. But Tidy Whitey says empathy. And he says, quote, walk a mile in their shoes, consider their life, enter into their emotional experience. Then it went from simple homosexuality to the redefining of marriage. Now, polyamory, polygamy, every form of gender-destroying experience. You must empathize, you must enter in, or you are unloving. Already the push to empathize with those who naturally experience intergenerational love, aka pedophiles, is in the academy and the culture. Marrying your cat or your Siamese fighting fish is just around the corner. Just empathize with the experience, validate it, then submit. You can't empathize. Empathy is not being a furry. Like, it's not like, have you all ever seen the movie Surrogates? All the humans live in these little houses and they're connected to all these wires. All they do all day is lie down in their easy chair, connected to a bunch of wires where they can live the experiences that they would be too scared to live in real life. And so they can, like, jump off a cliff, because they're living a virtual reality, so to speak. That's not what empathy is. Empathy isn't like, oh, you're gay? Well, let me imagine how it feels to be railed from behind as a man. Like, that's not what empathy is. Oh my gosh. White says, just empathize with the experience, validate it, then submit. That is not a progression. Like, you're making up that as a progression. If that is a progression, that is sin. It's not empathy. You know what else could be a progression? You make money, you buy drugs, you drop them down the drain. That's a progression. Should they not make money? Should they not have a means to feed their family? I'll tell you another progression. Driving a car. Should they floor it and go 100 in a residential? No. But anti-cars is just get behind the wheel of the car, floor it, then crash. Like, no, if I'm a stupid driver, if I give in to my emotions, validating an experience, and I'll go a step further. The idea of validating an experience is also a little convoluted because, now, I don't like the term validate because I think it's gotten, it means like authenticated or like give it credence, or like say like, oh yes, I believe there is moral objectivity to it. It's really supposed to etymologically mean confirm that it's real. Technically. Again, I don't use it. I think it's, I will define the word if I ever use it, but validating someone's experience is very universally understood as meaning you are giving that person your stamp of approval. However, it's just funny because that's not what the word means. If I'm going to validate the authenticity of a diamond, I'm going to confirm whether or not it's a real diamond. That's what it means technically to actually validate. So if I validate someone's feelings technically, and honestly, funny enough, as a psychology student now, the psych world still uses validate in this correct fashion, even though, street smarts, they don't. When you validate someone's experience, you tell the client that's telling you all about their woes that you believe what they're saying is true. Like if the person says, I was so angry at my mom or my dad, or I was so hurt by this or whatever it is. And the psychologist is like, I understand that must have been difficult. I believe that you were upset. I believe that you were embarrassed. They didn't say anything about like, oh, you were right to be angry. Oh, you were correct to be embarrassed. That was the correct response. None of that. Because it's confirming that you believe what someone's self-report is about themselves, regardless of his morality. But I just find it funny because they're so into like, oh, we want to like say all these words and like say what it really means, and then you use validate and have no idea what you're talking about. Then submit is what he says finally. Empathize with the experience, validate it, then submit. Submit to what? The experience? How do I submit to your experience? Because he's saying, if I empathize with it, then I'm going to validate it or give it moral credence. Then I'm going to submit to their experience. That's like so bizarre that you would submit. Like, I'm going to change what I do now. Like, what do you mean? Oh my gosh, this is not empathy. Empathy in real life, empathy experiences someone's feelings and then treats them how you would like to be treated in such a case. Now, with the caveat, obviously, if the person's asking you to sin, like we talked about earlier, but that's not generally what happens if someone's hurting. Like, if you're hurting, your mind is preoccupied with alleviating your own pain. If someone shows you that they too wish you to be pain-free, you're not going to be like, but you've got to like believe the way I do. Like, you're not going there. Like, these people don't understand how humans work. It's so... Anyway, James White continues, quote, "When I see a brother or sister who's experiencing what they call trauma, and I first, before diving in with them, inquire as to the source of said trauma, and then discover it is rooted in rebellion, in sin, or in simple ignorance of God's truth, the last thing they need from me is the validation of their emotional responses. They need me to stay out of their emotions, stay firmly planted on solid ground, and reach out of hand of help. I can sympathize with their situation, but I cannot enter their emotions, not if I actually love them." Okay, first of all, he never actually goes through what happens if the trauma is actually actual trauma, because he is going to assume, just, I know him and his whole thing, he assumes trauma is usually rebellion. That's what the assumption is. He doesn't say, when I see a brother or sister who's experienced what they call trauma, if it's actually trauma, then blah, blah, blah. If it's not trauma and it's just rebellion, then blah, blah, blah. No, because he already assumes his thing. And it's a lot easier to attack empathy as being a sin when this is the usual. Second of all, he says, I can't enter their emotions, not if I actually love them. Jesus wept. Jesus wept. Why did he weep? I'll tell you what a past recon pastor told me. I'll tell you. Why did Jesus weep with the whole Lazarus situation? He wept because he was so upset. He was upset that anyone would be upset in this situation because isn't it obvious there's an afterlife? Isn't it obvious that Jesus is there and everything's going to be okay? They were missing the picture. And it was so grieving, which is why Jesus groaned in the spirit, as it says. That's why he wept. That it wasn't because he was walking a mile in our shoes and he was sad that his friends were feeling poorly. That they were experiencing a heavy loss of someone they cared about. No, he wasn't weeping because of that. It couldn't have been like a real reason, like a earthly reason. He couldn't share in human emotion. It had to be some non-disclosed heavenly body emotion. Jesus wept. And guess what his friends said? Behold how he loved him. It was obvious because they were all sharing in the emotional trauma of the experience. They didn't say, why is he crying? It wasn't out of character for him. Let's move on because we have more to cover. Rigby or whatever, frickin' Rigney wrote a damn book called The Sin of Empathy, and it is taking the internet by storm.